Welcome to Weitzman School of Design. I'm Rosanna Hu. I'm the chair of the architecture department. And I want to thank everyone. I know it's a busy week. Every week is a busy week during the semester. So I want to thank everyone for coming to our lecture. And please continue to come because we have a very exciting program every semester. So let me start with a quick introduction on our speaker, and then she will come and give her talk, and afterwards we usually can spend about 5 to 10 minutes for questions and answer. Architecture's relationship to commission has evolved dramatically as globalization has transformed practice. The roles architects play in initiating versus responding to work have shifted. Last week, we heard from Kirsten Gears, if you remember, from a practice built largely through competition success. And tonight, we explore a fundamentally different approach, where traditional or Western practice operated through client, brief, response, that string of kind of process and practice, and also where competition culture offers another pathway, Tiantian Xu has developed a third model, one that begins not with awaiting opportunity, but with identifying need, challenging how we understand architectural agency itself. Tiantian Xu, founding principal of DNA Design and Architecture, received her bachelor in architecture from Tsinghua University and her master architecture in urban design from Harvard GSD. For 2 decades, she has developed what she terms architecture acupuncture, which is our title today. Not as a metaphor, but as methodology. The concept addresses a fundamental tension. Architecture's inability to keep pace with rapid social and economic transformation, yet architecture's capacity to catalyze that very transformation through strategic intervention. Her work operates between 2 poles and almost extreme poles. The architect as service provider, responding to briefs, the one that we know very well, working as an architect in a firm, and also the architect as diagnostician, initiating projects from observed social need, which is, I think, a new model that many young firms are finding to be a thriving model. Beginning with conventional commissions, her practice evolved when she recognized broader conditions that client briefs could not address. She gave new agency to architecture. This methodology and innovation has earned substantial recognition for her and her office. An AIA honorary fellow and elected member of the Akademie der Künste in Berlin. She has received the prestigious Swiss Architectural Award, Berlin Art Prize, the Marcus Prize, and recently the Wolf Prize in Architecture. So super impressive. UN Habitat has selected her architecture acupuncture as a case study for inspiring practice on urban-rural linkages. The Swiss Architectural Award jury, they noted about her distinction, quote, the successful combination between the civic stances animating her projects and the quality of the proposed architecture, characterized by a marked attention to the context, by a precise and poetic attitude at the same time. Beyond these accolades, tonight, we will explore how her work operates across scales, from infrastructural adaptation to production facilities that preserve intangible heritage. The significance lies not in the specificity of any one place, but it's on the paradigm shift, that architects might build coalitions around observed conditions, demonstrate value through strategic intervention, and position design intelligence as a catalyst for economic and cultural revitalization. We welcome Tiantian Xu.
Thank you, Rosanna. I want to thank all of you for coming tonight. This is really amazing opportunity for me to be here to share our work with you. And in the last 10 years, we have been mostly focusing with the rural context in China. This is the process that we want to explore the potential of architecture, but also the process that reassure that design and architecture can provide treatment for social issues. So I'm going to show you, this is a picture of Shanghai city. The development of this futuristic metropolitan happened maybe only in the past 3 decades. It was less than 40 years that China has gone through this urbanization, modernization, very rapid process with the developments mostly happening in the city, in the big city area. And then most of the rural regions are left behind and seemingly forgotten. But if you, this is rural villages definitely losing the young population to the cities, and also the community losing the confidence and the belief in their own future. But if you explore further of our rural villages, the rural area in China, with history of agrarian agricultural history in the past hundreds and thousands of years, you will understand how the people live in the nature, make a living with the production really based on the specific eco conditions, ecological situation, to build a life and also cultivate a very rich culture from region to region. And so I'm going to start first with the Songyang story. This is the I would say this is really the first collaboration in the rural area, started in year 2014, and it continued to be an 8 years collaboration. So Songyang is a very typical agricultural mountainous county in China with 50,000 population living in the county urban center and 190,000 population. The majority of the population are living in the small villages, around over 2,000 small ancient villages in the entire county. And the first village project was really, it wasn't planned. It was really kind of an encountering with this typical village in a mountain area, and when the community decided to demolish the cluster of abandoned buildings, this was the original condition, with the cluster about 4,000 square feet in the total building area, but was with the ownership of 7 families. And this cluster has been abandoned for 20 years. So the community decided to demolish, but we made counter offer to the county government with a new design proposal to preserve this cluster and to change the interior, to reorganize the interior into a community space, into open space, because of this traditional tenon and mortise timber structure can allow the flexibility of reassembling the interior structure. So this proposal made by us, we offered it as, it was done very quickly. It was done in less than a week. We made a design proposal and we brought it to the county level to offer that as a pro bono design project, but asked the county government to subsidize, to fund the project for this village community to renovate this cluster of buildings instead of demolishing them. And the construction was done in the typical local method, building method, with the tenon and mortise timber structure, and also with the ram earth, all these local materials, and was carried out also by the local villager communities. With this local vernacular building typology, always, the houses are always built by the villagers and maintained by the villagers themselves. Everybody in the village can be considered as a skilled builders or construction workers on this type of buildings. So that really allows this collective work with the community to build, was able to reuse this cluster of abandoned space into a community space, community meeting point at the entrance of the village, which is considered, as the really as an important fabric of the first generation who arrived in this location and built their houses around 200 years ago. And the upper floor, like some of the storage rooms, can be renovated into rooms for homestay businesses for visitors. And later on, this building also inspired young villagers, two young artists returning to Songyang County from Hangzhou City, and to start up this fabric dyeing studio in the Pintian village. So this has also become a very popular cultural educational program in the local, in Songyang County, to attract children, visitors, especially young families bringing children coming for a weekend stay over. And these young artists also help the local villagers to produce their local crafts and sell them online with the e-commerce platforms. So this village has become very popular destination in the region. When we first visited this place in year 2015, there were very few people, inhabitants, staying in this village. There were less than 20, and mostly elder people living in the village. And by now, this village has definitely thrived with over 160 inhabitants in total living in this back in this Pintian village. So that really helped us to understand. On one hand, is the building method, how to work with the vernacular typical houses, farmers' houses, then the potential to convert it into a community space to allow for visitors, allowed for cultural public programs. But at the same time, also for the local people, especially the people from other villages in the county would come to visit this place and to understand that all these abandoned or vacant farmers' houses still have the potential, still have values. So by the time we first arrived in Songyang, if you make a guess of this house, how much would they sell for? It was maybe $150 for one house, and nobody would buy that. But by now, if you come to Songyang and if you ask the local villagers that if you want to start up a homestay business, a bed and breakfast, right? It's a homestay business in the region, and if you want to acquire a house, that would be 100 times more expensive by now. So the property values increased because of the people, local people, especially the villagers understand there's a potential, there's a real value of their own houses. So we were asked by the local county for a long-term collaboration in this remote mountainous county. So we actually bring up this proposal that we could work with the different village communities after the first several buildings as a demonstration. So they will now they understand the value of architecture and design as well, and they would like to have architecture and design in their own home villages. So then next project we were actually collaborating with this Hakka village in Shicang, which is known for its Hakka indenture collection. So through this project, we on one side we were really learning about the Hakka indenture history, legacy, which is really the foundation of the Hakka society, the legal foundation, the legal system of Hakka families and Hakka society. At the same time, it also becomes an opportunity to through this project to revive this long-lost masonry building techniques, which we were able to invite 3 local skilled workers. We could only find 3 workers on such building techniques, but through this project, they were able to train the young villagers into masonry construction workers. And the project also become a monument to showcase this Hakka indenture collection in the village. It's actually the biggest, the largest Hakka indenture collection in the entire nation. So this is very valuable local heritage and assets, cultural assets as well. But at the same time, it's also a archived document this Hakka village history and legacy. So the space is conceived, with the local masonry building techniques to work with the light, to work with the wind, and to work with the local. This is actually existing creek on the site, and we include this into the space. So based on local climate, it doesn't need to be a completely artificial space. It can totally open up to the nature, to invite wind, the breeze into the space, to let the creek run through the building. But it also create a archaeological space for people to contemplate the legacy of Hakka indenture. And at the same time, it's also a open space, especially in the summertime. It becomes an inviting space for the villagers as a summer pavilion. So this project also inspired a urban investor coming from Shanghai city. She fell in love with this building immediately, and she also invested a business next to this museum, Hakka Museum, to refurbish the cluster of abandoned houses into a homestay business, and also work with the women in this village on local crafts and also on the homestay business. So we've been working with different cultural and history in different villages. For example, this one village used to be the most prosperous village in the entire county, with a history of over 600 years. But in the 90s, because of its location next to the urban center, and also with the new zoning as the industrial district. So the village, by now, the village is completely surrounded and buried up by these factories and chimneys. And the villager community didn't really believe in the potential of this, its own history or the potential or the future of this village. It's really about the factories, the industrial development in this region. But we understand that there's still a sense of pride and honor when we walk into the village and talk to the villagers, especially when they mention about their ancestor Wang Jing, who was the imperial scholar in Ming Dynasty and also the chief editor of the Yongle Encyclopedia in Ming Dynasty, the largest encyclopedia in the world. And he's also one of the 3 most famous historical figures in this region. So you could understand immediately that even though this village doesn't have the agricultural production, it doesn't have the scenic views or the beautiful image like the mountain villages, but still there's this sense of pride, the sense of identity, belonging to this community because of the ancestor. So on the first day of visiting this village, it was a rainy, pouring day, and we walked into this muddy roads into the village. And when we were walking around in the village, and all of us together, with the village community, with the cultural departments from the county government, we all agreed that there would be a program, a space dedicated to the ancestor as a memorial hall in front of the family ancestors hall, and would also become a space not only to address to the legacy of the ancestor, but as a community space as well. So this is how the space is conceived, with the structural corners converted into memorial corners, and with the skylight coming from the top of all these memorial corners. So in this way, we were able to work with these stone carving were actually coming from the factories surrounding the village. This is how when we were driving by, we saw this factory doing the stone carving, and immediately we decided this can be used as the display technique, which is very common way of working with the statue in the temples, in the ancestors' halls, but also working with the corners of the space. It frees up the central room so that space can accommodate for cultural and other public or community activities. With this opening of the memorial hall, the communities were very much inspired. There's a village family living next to this memorial hall. They started this small business selling local pancakes. And by now, it's also developed into a bigger business. So now they moved their shop into the urban center, the county urban center, and it's doing really good. And also the village community, this is a collective ownership in the Chinese villages. It's similar to co-op, but really collective as a large clan. All these families are related. They're more or less the relatives within this village. So very soon they collected money from every family to refurbish the ancestor halls and also renovate the abandoned ancient buildings, vernacular local buildings, and also repair the roads in the village. And we have also been working with the abandoned infrastructure, like this Shimen Bridge was about to be demolished because of the there's an adjacent new bridge built for vehicles. So this original Shimen Bridge become abandoned and also become an unsafe structure. So then with this river scenic district development, we made a proposal to the local government that this bridge, it doesn't need to be demolished. It can easily be transformed with, very simple design by adding a timber canopy that can really convert this unsafe structure, with the renovation, to convert it into a pedestrian walkways, a meeting space for the two villages across the river. Because this lounge bridge, it's very typical typology in the mountain region, in this region, both in Zhejiang province and Fujian province, in the mountainous area, that this lounge bridge is not only for people to cross over the river, but also as the important meeting space whenever there's a public event happening within the village. So this new added timber lounge will create this pedestrian, but also provide a shelter for this linear bridge that is in total was about 270 meters long. And the space can be used for different purposes. And at the same time, it also become the best viewing terrace for this adjacent water infrastructure facility that was built over 1,000 years ago. what I want to mention is that this also, the new bridge also becomes the symbol of reunion for the two villages across the river. These two villages used to be one village back in the ancient time over 200 years ago, and was eventually divided into two because of the flood of the river. So this also, kind of reunites the two villages into one. And we have also been working with the nature, the natural resource in this region. For example, this is in the village of Henken, the community, and then the head of the village invited us to build a bamboo structure for this ancient village that is surrounded by bamboo forests. So there's really beautiful scenic views. They would also want to have a space built by bamboo to create something new to build, and also to build as identity of this village. So we've been working with one bamboo pavilion before, after chopping off the bamboo sticks and working with the steaming and exposure with the sun for weeks, and to go through all these treatment procedure. And we realized that for this type of bamboo growing in the mountain area, which is called Maozhu, it has such a strong root system, can work as a foundation. And then the bamboo sticks are very flexible, can be bent into different degrees. So this can definitely work into a structure by working with the live bamboo, which also work with the local villagers together. This construction or this process of building took over. It was about a week to realize this space. And we didn't realize that at the time, this was actually a picture sent through an architect friend from Shanghai as well. And it instantly, may bring a connection to this literary spirit of this painting by Qiu Ying, also from Ming Dynasty. But the space of this bamboo theater is really for it's actually a casual open space in the nature, but you can also host different activities like the village routine, celebration or local performance, opera performance in this space. And we also see that as a metabolic architecture, and the form just come naturally. By the intention to weave them together. And later on, this was called the Pantheon of Songyang. And working in rural villages, you can't ignore the agriculture, right? The agriculture and production is really how every village community, everybody is making a living, making a survival on top of the local production. But if you go through the rural area, almost every village has their specific agricultural production that they are proud of. For example, the Tiantian village that I show in the first one had this vegetable cultivation. They had the best vegetable in the region, and Xing village, which is which is a flatland village, that is really known for the best brown sugar production in the region. So this became the starting point to work with the brown sugar production as a new factory, but also not only for the production, but also for the a space to represent the intangible cultural heritage of this village. So that's the new factory setback from the village, because the traditional brown sugar cooking process is very striking performance. It happens in the winter time before the Chinese New Year. So it was really a celebration of the village community, and you smell the sweetness of the cooking of the sugar when you walk into the village. But then because of all these production happened in a family kitchen, backyard kitchen. So it definitely, there was fire risks, and there was a safety risks, and also hygiene issues, and also the interruption to the village daily life, because the production has to run 24 hours a day with the 3 shifts. So the idea to have a centralized collective, not centralized, but collective space, setting away from the village fabric, is to ensure the all these issues that can be solved with this new space as a collective space. And at the same time, it's also functioning as a community center to accommodate different cultural events. But what's the most important content happening in this building is definitely the cooking process. This main central space is conceived as a central stage. The height, the sequence of the working stations, and then the geometry of the space, the layout of the chimneys are all decided together with these family workshops to identify how many units, family units, are going to run within this space with such a intense production procedure happening in the winter season. But at the same time, we also see that this is a striking live performance. It's a live museum to showcase the local traditional, intangible cultural heritage. So this factory is also a live museum to attract visitors. So now every winter season, I think it will start soon, in about a month or 5-6 weeks, they will open up this sugar festival. So the cooking will start again with this space running day and night, 24 hours, with 3 shifts. And you can also see that this is space that we also, we bought these uniforms online. They were $2 per set. We bought it on Taobao. Only for for this color, it's making these cooking masters. They all have this. They are entitled as the cooking masters in the region, and become the actors, become the performers on the stage. And very soon they also become the local celebrities who's really skilled in this cooking brown sugar production. It's actually, with the next project, I'm going to introduce other production as well. All the skilled production workers, no matter, whether it's food or it's quarry stone production, if you are skilled workers in this certain production, now we call it profession, but anyway, and you would become a respectful person in your community, and similar to what we call celebrities now. So the space is run 24 hours. So even the lighting design is conceived as stage lighting. And together with the heat, with the steam, and also with the movement of these cooking masters, the space become a striking and attraction during the winter season. So the new space to upgrade production conditions and also to showcase this performance as a central stage to attract visitors would also increase the price of the brown sugar. It has increased. A few years ago, what I got from the local community is that the price increased 5 times. But even by now, actually by last year, the price went up again. So now it's almost like 10 times of what they were originally selling. But anyway, if you consider all these local made food, organic, very homemade food, they're limited editions, and with this, it's not like the mass production out of the modern factories. So this makes the product definitely increase the value, the economic value, and also the cultural value of this brown sugar cooking as an intangible cultural heritage. And space is also accommodating, other programs for village gathering space, for for visitors as well. And very often during non-production season, the space is also used for other cultural activities. For example, the local cultural performance or gathering events as well. And the factory is run by the village community. So that means that they have the ownership of this production. They're not just the workers, they're the shareholders of this collective entity. And in another village, Caizhai in the mountain, which is also a Hakka village, is known for the best tofu production in the region. So in this case, a new tofu factory is built at the entrance of the village. And this happened after the village community saw the success of the sugar factory. So they come up to us with a new proposal for a tofu factory, and they already, identified this buildable lot at the entrance of the village, and it made a proposal of, they counted the needed square meters, the volumes of the space, and also the sequence, because of tofu production. It's not like the sugar cooking space, it's happening in one central compartment, but this is rather divided into different compartments based on the tofu procedure, on the tofu making procedure, from soaking, grinding, cooking, deep frying, and then at the end, the tasting hall. So the space is like, with all these compartments located on this terraced topography, and each one is showing it's actually it's a production space, but again it's also a live demonstration of the traditional way of cooking, of making tofu. So following this terraced topography, this tofu factory is like a episodes of traditional way of making tofu. So we also designed a parallel walkways following this topography, but also following the procedure. So then you can observe the process of producing tofu, following all these compartments, and the space can also become the community leisure pavilion. And at the end, you will arrive at the tasting space, the tasting hall. And again, this is also a multifunctional space, can work as a community to host. This can also host community events and different activities. We had one. We had a UN Habitat conference in Songyang, and one of the talk was actually taking over this tofu space as a meeting space for the conference. But what's really fascinating is after the build of this project, after the realization, and the village community was really inspired, and they brought up more initiatives. For example, they actually invented this educational program with all these tools scaled down for the young children. So this is actually an additional cultural educational program, but also additional revenue for the village community, especially over the weekends or during the holidays, when the young families bring the young children to visit the rural village and also to engage with this cooking and tofu making process. So all of these projects are the examples of our architectural acupuncture, which is really working as a systematic strategy in the county region like Songyang, with many small villages, like I said, over 2,000 small ancient villages. And we have been working with over 20 locations running through the county urban center and the different villages or rural locations in the entire region. And each one location is really to identify the very unique or specific heritage or tradition or legacy of the place, and what would make the people proud and what would motivate them later on. So the projects are all connected as becoming a mapping system of the entire region. The idea is really to stimulate local circulation, cultural and economic circulation within the region. And later on, we understand that this working in the large scale of regional scale, but looking into very specific and very detailed locations to create this circulation, the systematic circulation within the region that can also work in the other regions and other issues. For example, this is the chapter on Tulou in Fujian province, which is my home province. And have you heard about this Fujian Tulou? Or you've probably seen this vernacular typology from somewhere. And because this is World Cultural Heritage by UNESCO, inscribed in year 2008 with 46 Tulou buildings. But I guess many of you, including myself, well, I didn't know that there were actually thousands of Tulou buildings in the region. And there were even more, maybe 30 years ago. This was very common local typology. And a lot of them have been demolished. But this is a Tulou used to build with very specific functionalities for defense. People would fight together against common enemies. At the same time, they also live together. This is a very modern concept of collective living, by happening, almost 1,000 years ago, since started almost 1,000 years ago. The most ancient Tulou in the region has a history of 700 years, which is Yuchang Tulou in Nanjing County. So all these collective living would allow people to live together, work together, and fight together under very extreme conditions, social conditions, back in the ancient time. But at the same time, it also built up very rich cultural heritage and legacy with this Tulou region in south of Fujian province. But again, with the economic development, many of the Tulou buildings become vacant and abandoned. So this is really the current condition. Thousands of Tulou have been abandoned, people moved out of this ancient collective living structure and build their own single-family houses, all moved to the cities, moved to the apartments, modern apartments. So there has been we really consider this as a urgent social architectural issues with this vernacular typology. And whenever we ask someone on the street, in local villages, they would consider these Tulou would be outdated. They're not working anymore in a contemporary context. And also for the local government, because most of the Tulou buildings, if you're not the UNESCO Tulou, or if you're not the National Heritage Tulou, then you wouldn't get enough funding to maintain the buildings, to maintain the structures. So that's also a kind of a dilemma for the local government. They would like to renovate, to renovate or rebuild all these Tulou buildings. But at the same time, with thousands of Tulou, they're definitely short of funding. So this actually, we made a proposal, again, considering the ruin as a new typology. So with the heritage building regulations, you would need to rebuild the Tulou into original conditions. But then we would make a proposal that maybe the Tulou doesn't need to be rebuilt, maybe only to renovate the leftover structures It doesn't matter how much, a half of the structure or 1/3, a quarter of the structure remains. But to keep the rest of the ruin as a new typology, as a new open space, as gardens or as new terrace, as new courtyards. So then this proposal was accepted by the local, the city of Zhangzhou, and we were working together with the 3 counties to take over 7 different Tulou buildings as a model examples for the rest of 1,000 Tulou in the region. And then the first one is the Cui Tulou, which is in this circular building that has about 11 families remaining in this Tulou as the original inhabitants. But this was really not a pleasant condition when we first visited the Tulou. You will see that with only the buildings are actually not fully occupied, with a lot of units being vacant, and only the families living there within, only the 11 families are living here. They didn't get enough of support, or there was no sense of a community or collective living anymore after most of the families moved out. So the design proposal we made is not to rebuild everything, all the units, but only to, first of all, to connect corridors. This is very important because all the families living in the Tulou buildings, they share the same corridors. So this is how it looks like when the corridors are connected or repaired. And the second step is to move the kitchen, the cooking part, out of the first floor, because every unit belonging to the one family has the kitchen on the ground floor, but the indoor space in the indoor space, and then second floor as the storage, and the third floor, maximum to the 5th floor as the bedrooms. But all these units are sharing stairs, common stairs, normally 4 common stairs. So that means that all of these families, you have to go through, you have to go through all these connecting corridors to meet each other, and also to reach to your own bedrooms upstairs, which is very intense kind of a system, but also makes this Hakka family very close and strong bonding. So it's very unique and specific social system happening with these Tulou communities. So that to connect the corridors and to access to all the stairs is the first step. And second step is to move out the cooking space out of the interior, kitchen space for the fire issues. Because all of these structure built with the timber, the kitchen, when it's outdoor, it actually, and also adapt to the local climate, and that was also asked by the inhabitants. They would like to have more space for their daily activities. So that was actually agreed by local heritage department as well, for safety issues, for fire issues. And this type of Tulou system would also allow the construction to happen at the same time when the local inhabitants are still living within the buildings. They don't need to move out to give the space for the construction. So from this diagram, you can tell that all these voids, the vacant space, they don't need to be rebuilt into the living parts, but actually the openness can create a new kind of a community space or platforms to invite visitors. So that's how the space that can really become the open space in the different levels to invite visitors to understand the local life as the meeting space, but also open up new business potentials. And actually the reason for the local inhabitants to ask, they prefer to move the kitchen out to the outdoor space. On one side, it's because of the local climate, but also this exposure of the kitchen space on the ground floor would become a food stand for visitors coming to this Tulo. And the space is also shared as a community common ground for festivals and for different activities and gatherings. And with this Tulo, in the same village, it was burned down by fire over 200 years ago. So part of the building remained. And you could tell that ram earth was already burned into these ruin conditions. So with this Tulo, we were not asking to rebuild everything, or neither the timber structure nor the ram earth walls, but actually we were only repairing, renovating the leftover structures to create open space. But at the same time, this Tulo is introduced with a new program as a Ram Earth Cultural Center. So it provides a platform for the local local villagers to showcase their Ram Earth building techniques, and also can work as educational space for visitors to understand, the Ram Earth construction techniques as a sustainable way of building. And then at the same time, the leftover of these ram earth walls becomes the monument or the exhibition of the ram earth culture space. And another Tulo is actually collapsed. This was abandoned for over 30 years and collapsed at the entrance of the building. The trees also died when we visited this Tulo, this abandoned structure. But this actually becomes a new opportunity to introduce a lookout terrace working on top of the entrance with the ruin, because with the original Tulo buildings, with the heritage building regulations, you're not able to open up the walls for larger openings. All these Tulo buildings were built because of the defense purpose. So all the windows are very small, either without any windows on the facade. So this actually becomes the ruin makes it possible for this Tulo to build lookout terrace over the entrance because of the existing condition. So later on, this Tulo was actually going to convert it into Xianfeng Shudian, an avant-garde bookstore, which will open later this year. So the design we are proposing is only to give a framework to demonstrate that these Tulo buildings, these ruined Tulo buildings, can still be performative. But later on, each Tulo would have its own new programs based on each context and specific conditions. The overall idea is to prove that these vernacular buildings, after losing the original functionalities for defense and or for collective living, this sustainable structure with the timber, with the ram earth, with local stone and tiles, can still work as a community space, or can still accommodate public or cultural programs, activities. And this, with this Tulo, we also wanted to introduce a new structure system with the CLT timber structure, which is modern timber structure, which doesn't have the fire issues, but at the same time can also continue this typology to create a dialogue with the existing leftover building, but at the same time also able to open up the space which would allow for open space, larger space for galleries. So even during the construction, the local villagers were started to gather in front of the building to take it as a pop-up market. So overall, we want to argue that ruin is a new opportunity because it doesn't have to be always the negative. So the ruin brings new potential, new opportunities for each tulo that on top of very strict system of this vernacular typology, the ruin happen in each tulo can create a new condition, a new space for each one, and later on can be converted into other public spaces or community spaces. And then we also bring this acupunctural strategy to work on abandoned quarries. For example, this is this is in Jingyun County, which is next to Songyang County. So Songyang, because of its flat land and because of the agriculture and because of the soil on the land and the agricultural land, so it was. You see that Songyang in the Songyang County, the main production is some agriculture, but this geographical condition in Jingyun, which is different, because of the stony mountains. So in the past 1,000 years, most of the production happening in this region is stone quarrying, we used to own by family workshops. That means small operations working with the small caves. And run through over 1,000 years. So basically, the stone quarrying production is very significant production in Jingyun County. Every family has relative or knowing someone used to work in the quarry production until year 2000, when these small operations were closed down because of safety and ecological issues, and which left the whole county with over 3,000 abandoned quarry spaces. So I have a documentary showing that was filmed around year 2000, around the millennium time, showing how the production was carried out with manual operation. So apparently it was very intense, very harsh working environment, but still the local community, they had very strong sentimental connection with quarry production in the region. This is interview with the quarry worker.
70年代那个时候，我们这里基本上都是打石头的，没有别的生活的，就是靠打石头过日子的。70年代、80年代、90年代，那30年代是全部都是搞石头的别的没有事情做了。到90之后呢，有的就是不打石头了，别的是工作去了。所以以后呢，这个下面这个是要机械化了。 有机器进去了，不是人工打的。我这次讲这么句，我是16岁就打石头了，这个红家，那以前我们打石头是很苦的，早上6点钟就到这里了，到了山上去了，到晚上6点钟，一天到晚，那个时候呢，饭都吃不饱，打石头是饭都吃不到，一天打。
So with over 3,000 abandoned quarry space in the region, this has become quite an issue for the local government. They started to discuss how to reuse these spaces, or just at least what to do with these spaces, with these unsafe existing leftover spaces since over 10 years ago. And there were proposals made, to convert them into hotels or convert them into religious traditional Buddhism caves. But because of the intensity of engineering and also the funding, the budget, this just never, nothing happened in the past 10 years. So the local quarry workers, including Ms. Liu, they were really eager to make a move to see what can happen to these quarry spaces. So after talking with the local community, and especially with the all these quarry workers and with the local different departments, with the county departments, we actually brought up this proposal with the 9 quarries in total. Each one would be introduced with the new cultural or public programs really based on the quality and the conditions of each quarry space. So our initial program with the invitation to visit Jingyuan County was to design a number of new buildings for like cafe, like community space or bookstore or bookshops, like all these cultural public program to attract visitors, but with the new buildings. So we made a counter offer that maybe instead of making new buildings, let's take a look of these existing spaces. This is local, existing local resources, and so after 4 months of intense discussions and meetings, always, with the room of 40, 50 people, sometimes over 100 people negotiating and discussing. So at the end, we were able to receive the approval, receive the permission to carry out with this design proposal to look into the existing quarry spaces. So first of all, of course, we work with the geotechnical engineers to ensure the safety for safety reinforcement. And we were able to finish 3 buildings. They were still in the year 2021. All the 3 quarry spaces were finished with the construction within 6 months, including both safety reinforcement and also the space reuse. So the first quarry space is the program is based by the request of these quarry workers as a demonstration site for their quarrying skills. Like I said, similar to brown sugar cooking masters or tofu making masters, these are the quarry masters. They all have this entitlement and which they are really proud of. So this is a demonstration site to see that how the quarrying can be produced and can happen, with this manual operation as a demonstration. But also this space, this is as an arrival point for visitors. And then second space, because of its acoustical quality, it becomes a performance area, for local young villagers or for traditional opera performance. And then the third quarry is actually 2 quarry caves connected. So first one comes with you have to pass through these joints with the concrete safety reinforcement, and then to arrive to the next cave, which is 38 meters in height. and also left over with the internal topography when the quarry was closed down. So you see the terraces and also the walkways, they were just production spaces, and also the pathways for the quarry workers to carry out the stones. So we wanted to take this internal topography as the existing, not only as existing conditions, but also as the traces of this leftover, of these memories dedicated to the quarrying legacy, that the space, this spectacular spaces carved out, created by the quarry workers through generations and by manual operation through very harsh, intense working environment, that these quarry workers were really proud of these spaces. Mr. Liu, the quarry worker on the interview, he was the volunteer to supervise the construction site, and he would come every day to look after the process. And an opening day, and many of the villagers were actually in tears, especially these older quarry workers. So you would see that we were not trying to take the quarry space as a site, as a topography, but rather we take it as an existing architectural space, and how we can introduce a layer of trace for, to introduce the human scale in contrast with the magnificent scale of the quarry space, but also to provide a landing ground for visitors. And this space is also dedicated to the local calligraphy, literati, cultural legacy, heritage happening in this region, which is really scenic, beautiful area. And this book mountain, and also as a cultural metaphor to this literati spirit. So the space is working to provide a landing ground for people with the, it wasn't just for production anymore, but now it's introducing a new layer of cultural, of public space. But at the same time, also to take these quarries as the monument dedicated to the quarry workers. And we kept saying that, they are the true architects of the space. So I want to mention that we understand that, in this process, the role of architects also changes. I mean, for us as trained architects, we're not here to build from scratch. But on the contrary, we are here to discover, to connect, to facilitate, we can identify this space, not only with the production, but also with the culture, heritage, and more importantly, the legacy of the collective memory belonging to this place and to the people. And the last chapter, I want to introduce an ongoing project. It's happening in my home city. So we've seen that all these mountain projects. Now we come to an island, which is a small island with 40,000 inhabitants, which is the home island of this goddess Mazu, the goddess of sea, who is worshipped by the global Chinese society. The city of Macau literally means Mazu Temple. It was named with the Mazu Temple. So every year there are over 3 million visitors coming to a small island, but only visiting mainly to the north part where the Mazu Temple located, or to the beach, during the summer for tourism. Maybe some of them would visit this natural park at the south part of the island. So we were first invited as the initial program was an iconic museum at the center of the island. I guess you can trace it back to the Bilbao effect, a centralized iconic landmark museum to attract visitors that seems to started in Bilbao in last century and also bring to contemporary China in this small island. So this concept has been going around for decades, and unfortunately it's still continuing. But here we make a different proposal. Instead of the iconic museum, we do consider the temple and the statue of this module, which is about over 40 meters tall. These are the iconic objects on the island already existing. So you don't need an iconic museum. You don't need a landmark. You would with these 3 million people coming to the island, and also by the request of the local villager communities, they have over 11 villages. They have 11 villages living on this island. So they would like to have more exposure with this pilgrimage, visitors or tourism and also it's with the museum to have everything showing within the space. Why can we turn this entire island into a life museum to showcase, the memory, the production, the ecology, the beauty of the space, the life story of the place on its own, original location. So that this island you can drive around the island within half an hour. So the proposal comes with 6 different locations, really to look into very specific, very unique life and production or eco conditions happening on this island. So first one is the Seaweed Ecological Center. This is the program that we just met someone on the beach, and we asked this fisherman. He was working with the fishing net on the beach and about how do you make a living on this island, right? So he would brought us to this seaweed cultivation belonging to his home village. This is a seaweed cultivation happening on the west part of the island, which is the mudland. And these are the spaces for a seaweed incubator within this structure. But really beautiful, fascinating structure with the seaweed seeds. We call it baby seaweed, attached to the oyster shells and soaking in the ocean water. So this is the incubator for the seaweed to grow within 8 months before they were transported to the mudland. So somehow this is not architectural, but really fascinating knowledge that we learned from the fishermen on this island, how they can make a living with this very specific local ecological conditions and create a phenomenon on the mudland with these beautiful seaweed cultivation structures and also the incubator space. So instantly, this inspired for a new space on this location to take some of the incubator spaces and to integrate with the cultural educational programs. So on one side, the building will face the island, face the ocean, look out to the ocean. And on the other side, it's connecting to the village fabric, to the community. But with the central space to accommodate this seaweed incubator, the pools, the silent space as a center for the production. So that's a new space for cultural programs to look out to the ocean. But the central space is what really as the incubator or ecological center, similar to a factory. But here it's a different type of production, different type of economic resource activities happening. And also the structure is based, even the skylight is based on the production request on different, to monitor the light coming, the amount of light coming into the space. And on the other part of the this island, we also, this is the west side of the island, where it has, the east side is the mudland, and the west side is the real ocean water, which could drop to over 10 meters, 12 meters deep. So here you have the kelp cultivation, and also floating bamboo islands with oyster, with abalone cultivation underneath the water, or the fish, like fish pond, artificial fish pond in the middle of the ocean. So there's a different types of aquaculture. And was always very fascinating knowledge that, I mean, even this is happening in my home city. I've been visiting the island since childhood, and I never carry with this knowledge of how people, make their production, make their living. Of course, they get the best food, best seafood, right? You get the most fresh seafood from the island, but you never realize how people made this production through the rhythm of the nature, through the pattern of the nature of the ocean. So that was really inspiring process. We immediately decided that, working with the existing typology of this floating bamboo structure, bamboo island, that we can conceive a space, a structure to integrate kelp production, oyster production, which would be actually environmental friendly for the ocean water, which would absorb the inorganic CO2 in carbon in the ocean water, but also to integrate with the fish cultivation, because the combination, by the recent research, the combination of fish, kelp, or oyster will reduce the pollution to the ocean water. So this is actually it's not very difficult to understand, but fishermen, they just, because they were so used to one type of production, either kelp or either fish. But now it's just, the design is actually just proposed to include or to integrate all these different type of productions together. So as the strategy also to reduce the pollution. So this will automatically become a research platform, because of the local universities will always send students to this region for culture, for aquaculture or ecological researches. So we also introduced this space not only for the fishermen, but also can become a shelter for visitors, mostly for the researchers and young students. So this actually become a structure to integrate a more environmentally friendly production, aqua production, and also the research, the educational research program into one structure. So this was the testing phase. And another community plaza, when the fishermen returning home after, their fishing process, started in very early 3-4 a.m. in the morning and return before noon, they would always pass through this this community plaza. So here, as a arrival point, we wanted to introduce a space, but the space is as an entry point, a gate, but also as an open space to welcome, returning home from this shipping work every day. And so the space is actually located on this cliff next to the ocean. And the design idea isn't to build a new space, but rather to take the existing space in between the cliff, and also, creating a space. The space would also change, depends on the high tide and low tide. So our design is only to introduce a layer of roof to provide a entry point, a gateway for the fishermen returning home to their community plaza. So this is again a light structure, but here, the space, the architectural space is really in between. It's already existing in between the cliffs, and really based on the high tide and low tide of the ocean, which could be 8 to 10 meters different with the tides. And And this project is mangrove research base. We were looking, okay, now we're back to the West Mudland. So this was really the difficult project because this fish pond was closed down. This is actually a cultivation pond for clams, for crabs, were closed down because of a mangrove plantation by the coastal line, which is a national ecological restoration, coastal line ecological restoration policy. And it's happening in all these coastal areas. So because of this mangrove plantation, and also this cultivation pond was abandoned for 2 years, closed down and abandoned, and eventually replaced with this mangrove plantation. So our design was first actually working with this, you could see at the bottom of the image, this abandoned structure that was left over, abandoned for decades. And our design started with this cluster, and we even made it to the CD drawings. But at the end, when they started to, when they were about to start the construction, the local authorities realized the ownership has all these legal complications, and it was impossible for them to acquire the ownership of this cluster. So it was very frustrating at that moment. We were just walking around, trying to figure out, is there any other potential that we can, is there any other abandoned space or structure that we can use? But that was actually after, talking with the mangrove scientist, an expert who is also a professor at Tsinghua University in Beijing, and understanding how mangrove works, it switched our perspective completely, that we started to understand the mangrove, it's not just a forest, it's really a intelligent ecosystem happening on this mudland area, providing a shelter for biodiversity, for birds, for fish, clams, crabs. And it really creates a shelter. It's much more intelligent than our buildings. So, and the scientist, Professor Ling, also mentioned that this cultivation pond, now with the mangrove plantage within the space, it can work as a shelter together with the mangrove trees. So that gave us inspiration. Instead of a building, a space for people only on the land, why don't we look into the mudland with the space already built or conceived by the mangrove trees? And is there any potential that we can work together with the cultivation pond, which was abandoned for decades and already collapsed? So after discussing with the mangrove scientist expert, we realized that only by renovating, rebuilding, or renovating this cultivation pond, which is such a phenomenal scale in the ocean, that the space can, once you repair that, and without it, it's not for cultivation anymore, but it would automatically become a sheltering space for biodiversity happening on this mudland, which probably we don't really realize, because the architect's mind is always with the people scale, with the people space. We talk about people-centered space, but it's always people-only space. So this really stretched a different perspective, how we understand the space, and it's also very it creates this phenomenon on the mudland, that with the low tide you see the entire mudland with the cultivation pond emerging, but when the tide goes up, when the water surface raises, the pond will disappear and completely disappear underneath the water. So it also opens up a new discussion. Maybe the space was already existing on the mudland. the nature create the space with monitored accessibilities for human beings. So you can, young researchers or visitors can walk to the mudland only with during the low tide, but with the nature closed off the space with the high tides. So this the cultivation pond, we definitely think even though it's very minimal, we're not doing much. It's not, you don't really see the design renderings or detailed drawings. And everything was done on site with the way that the fishermen were familiar with, how they build in their own context. But we consider this as really significant project for us. It's completely changing our perspective, understanding on architecture, whether architecture is just a space, an artificial space for human only, or that architecture was already existing in the natural context, created by the nature with a much different scale, with the tides of the ocean, with the rhythm, the pattern of the nature, and creating the space. Together we can create a space, not for human, but really for the biodiversity, for the other species. Thank you very much. This is the end of my lecture today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the lecture. It was really provocative. In the professor who said in the introduction remarks that compared to the last lecture, that the way where the Christian Gears usually gets his projects from competitions, where your office would work with like the government to get your project. So I'm just really curious to push for specifics on that. So specifically with the Songyang village project and the bridge project, you kind of sort of started with your narrative with almost as positioning yourself as the sort of the initiator, like you convince the government to do this and do that. So I wonder, how do those projects come about? Do you guys have like a catalog of sort of dilapidating buildings that was about to be turned down, and when they're about to demolish, and you sort of like go in and tell them to do this, or do they come to you? Thank you.
That's a very good question. The place like Songyang County, they didn't, especially the villages with their local construction, they didn't really have architects before. And like I said, all the buildings were built by the local villagers. They're very skilled workers, and they had everything in mind. They didn't need our drawings. So that's how we started. Actually, in the beginning, it was really us learning from the local villagers, but in the process to understand their needs, their real needs, and the challenges and frustrations, and also the dilemma of the rural. So in the process, we were actually receiving lots of requests. In the first year, we took over 12 pro bono projects. It was always that small projects, small projects, but started with the questions coming from the village community asking about what they should do. Can they demolish? Or if we have a better suggestions. So it never come up, in the beginning was never, not like the tofu project. That was 3 years after we started in Songyang. That was become so natural. They brought up the proposal after seeing the real cases built already, success. In the beginning was, like we talked about this yesterday, they were asking about whether to do this or not to do that. So we give some suggestions. And then a few days later, they were asked, can you make a sketch? They are not quite sure about that. So yes, we started to make the sketch for them. And then 2 weeks later, they would say, oh, can you make a rendering instead of the sketch? And so after the rendering, they like it, but now they want to construct the proposal, right? But since it's different design compared to the way they used to build, so they will ask, can you make some technical drawings? So this is just happening step by step. And yeah, it ended up that we were working with over a dozen pro bono projects. And even with a small office, it was quite a burden for us. And of course, the local, the county government and the local communities, they would like to collaborate, continue the collaboration. So then we proposed, can we have a more systematic collaboration and with this acupunctural strategy. So the acupunctural, it's actually, it referred to the minimal intervention, that you see that all these are small scale of projects. So this, I think even in different countries in Europe, it's for the public projects, it's a different system. Like in France, every project, even a small project, you have to go through competitions. But in Germany, it's not. Like certain scale of projects, you can go through commissions. And in China, like scale small projects, the very small scale projects, you can go through either commissions or invitations. Or invited competitions, yeah. So this is how the process, this process can continue. But what's more important is that, well, this is also another way of working in China. Like the local government, they would invite one architect. With the invitation, you come to visit and then you make a proposal. And then they would think about it for a few months. And when they were not sure, a few months later, they will invite another architect to visit and to make a proposal. So this proposal never come with, a given commission or a given program from the local government. They would, and you can tell that they definitely need the professional input of what to build and what not to build, right? So this is I think this is a process maybe different from other regions, but that actually brings, I see that, some architects will consider this is risky because you never get the commission. You don't work with the payment. It's not in, ensuring of the payment, right? But actually, I would see it the other way around. It's a learning process. And once you understand local context, both the needs, the challenges, the request, the demands, and I think, and especially it has to go through very intense communications, meetings, fightings, negotiations. So I think this will bring the project to find, or your design to find a common ground, which will reach the consensus with the local sectors. And we don't really call them clients. I think it's more about the collaboration or even co-authorship. I would say it's rather the co-authorship. It's never a client giving you commissions. So but I would say this is quite different because of in the rural region when they didn't have enough funding and they didn't have the access to professional architects. So this is how it's working. It's formulating into quite a different pattern compared to the projects, which is already planned and programmed within the blocks, following all the regulations. So the architects can only, or participate in a very later phase of the conceiving of the whole project, right? But in the rural context, you would request architects to have more knowledge about the local land policy, the local building regulations, and also, yes, community needs. So this is that actually, I would think it expands the capacity of our profession.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. I really enjoy these fascinating journeys while you present these projects. My question is that, so all these projects start with an abandoned site or piece of long forgotten memory culture. So my question is that, so why this type of project attract your attention? And in another word, is what's the internal connections between these projects? So why it's so important to you to do this type of project?
It's not about whether it's important or not. It's just I love the context. I love these, the culture and the heritage, and you immediately find a connection. But then, on the other hand, it was actually unfortunate to see how the rural were forgotten, left behind with the potentials, with huge potentials, with the underestimated values, assets, cultural and economic assets and potentials. And you realize that, through the design, which is not extensive design, we rather call it minimal acupunctural design engagement intervention that can really revive the potential and can, for example, like abandoned too low vernacular buildings or abandoned quarry, considered as waste of a closed down operation or outdated building typology, that can still be performative, that can still generate new income and social cultural improvements for the local, for the place. So this is, I really see this as actually urgency. And with the interview we had earlier, it was about the, when you say acupuncture, it's a medical term, right? It's a medical treatment. So there was issues, there was symptoms already existing. You have to acknowledge the symptoms in order to make a diagnosis, to provide the solution with the design.
Thank you for the presentation. I want to build on these questions. I was very inspired by the coexistence of two low ruins and new community space, but I'm also concerned about the fall hazard, seeing rammed earth wall erecting in middle of the village. So since they are considered as a monument in your proposal, I'm curious if there are any maintenance plan developed for the ruins. And also, speaking from a larger picture, as an architect, what are some efforts you have to make while working with challenging existing conditions in China compared to building a new architecture from ground zero?
The first question is about the ruin, right? The maintenance. So we have experts, including like the state-owned design institutes, engineers from the institute, and also the local experts, the local villagers as the experts. So, and we also have the monitor, really. What is called cameras or like monitors monitoring the process of all these rammers to walls. So this is a really it's a good question with this technical aspect. And then the other question was about right. Build from the scratch, build from zero, build a new building, right? And that's, most architects, I used to love to make new buildings, but now, no, it's completely different. I feel like, there's a, I don't know, I feel like it's more, not just better, and faster, cheaper, to work with existing structures. And I'm talking about from very practical side. And if you're working with the existing structure, you will, it bring a better communication with the local people. because that's something they're familiar with. But the economic side is really important. If you want to work in a rural area, you have really to take upon this. I would say this not as a challenge, but this really as part of your skills to make things cheaper, affordable, work with the local available existing resources, and improvise on this very often limited resources. But I think it changes your understanding of building as well. And I always said architecture is it's not only buildings. Architecture already existing, on this planet, it depends on how you see the architecture. So cultural aspect, the legacy, the heritage, and even the motivation from, coming from the community. That's all the intangible resources when you work on the project. And the goal isn't to build something. The goal is to actually, through the building, through architecture, that you can achieve for something more dynamic, long-term revival in this place. So we have seen people, young people returning to Songyang County, and many of the villages. I mean, Songyang was really a place. I didn't know about the place, and I guess most people wouldn't really know about this county. But now it's become quite a popular county destination. At least on the Chinese social media, like Red Note.
I wanted to ask about the way that you frame your design work as a co-design partner. You recognize already design energies and design action within the communities that you're working with. You're identifying design opportunities before you arrive with your design. You're sort of becoming part of a process. So my question is also how do you, since a lot of these projects are a form of solidarity, design solidarity with an organization, with a community, etc., and you're doing it also a lot with pro bono. What other areas of work other than design do you have to engage with to make these projects possible? Like, of course, a lot of negotiations with public authorities, but also funding. You fundraise together with the community. Like, what are the various networks that you establish in order for this project? It's an incredibly complex practice.
Completely. I mean, I feel like we keep learning in this the whole process that we've been. Now we have the knowledge of this building, land policy, which is really important, buildable land or not, and sometimes the architect will come to the rural and identify this beautiful lot, but it's agriculture, it's permanent agricultural lot, it's never for building, right? And it's forbidden, it's only for the rice cultivation, it's not even for landscape. So you have to really understand these very specific requirements, and also the building regulations, like especially the heritage regulations, that with the Tulou buildings we have to, that was really, really difficult. I mean, we're not even finished after 5 years. Hopefully we'll finish the construction by end of this year. So it's been going on, now it's the 6th year. And we're doing the Tulou project for pro bono as well. And we have to negotiate with the different level of the heritage building departments in the city level, in the provincial level, and to change the design from time to time. Even during the construction, we have to alter when the official come in and say this is impossible, that we have to make a change again and again. So that was actually a very intense process with this heritage building. I guess if we were smart enough, we wouldn't get involved with these complications. But yes, the funding is really important thing. Now we get to understand, not that we raise, it's different way. We don't have the fundraise process, but you have to know the public project has different resources of city level, county level, city level, provincial level of funding. Agricultural funding, cultural funding, community funding, and also loans from the government, from the central government. And the project with Major Island, it comes from the ecological subsidy from the central government. And some of the village project in Songyang was actually through the agricultural subsidy, and some were actually coming with the community collective funding, and also county cultural funding. So there are all different types of funding resources that we have to work together. We need to work together to understand how much they can afford to build, right? And then we would know the design that we can achieve.
Okay, one last question.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this lecture. I remember first coming across images of the Bamboo Theater in 2021 at the MoMA, so it's really exciting to really learn in depth the context of that project. And I've also read a few of your interviews on architectural acupuncture, and I'm really grateful to kind of see this mergence between like theory and systemic application, which I find that there's often a disconnect there. And I feel like the idea of critical regionalisms really finds grounding in your community-centered projects. I'm really curious about the timeline for the projects on Meizo Island, as well as like how we can kind of stay updated on their developments, as well as a more contextual question that I have is, prior to the revitalization of the quarries, what were the livelihoods that people took on post the 2000s closures of the quarries? And in terms of rebuilding, did the quarries become government-owned once they were abandoned, or were they bought from the family operations?
After the year 2000, there was, with the whole economic development in China, right? We all understand the economic booming phase in China, with the growth every year achieve like 2-digit growth every almost every year. And so since then, the county of many counties, actually including both Songyang and Jingying, switched to industry compared to traditional agriculture or this quarry production. But with the Jingying, with this, with the project region, that there was also tourism development in that, because this is a very scenic, beautiful site with the very rich cultural heritage. So the tourism also bring the new and economic incomes, revenues for the local communities. Yes. So when we were invited for these buildings of leisure, cultural leisure programs, was not only for the community but also for visitors. But at that time, this whole area, I mean, they didn't really have many visitors at that time. So after the finish of the 3 quarries, and actually the total construction cost for the 3 quarries was about $1 million for 3 spaces, which is much, including the safety reinforcement, half, also with the space reuse. So that's much more affordable, much cheaper than making new buildings. Even just conventional buildings, it will be more expensive. 3 buildings, this scale, right? So that was actually very, that's affordable. So that's one of the reasons that we that the local community and local government accept this design proposal with the approval very quickly. But just to work with the quarries, actually now it becomes very popular destiny. So I mean, the quarry spaces, it's not, you don't have to pay. You can visit. It's just open space. But the amount of visitors coming to the region will bring new opportunities for the local, homestay businesses, local restaurants, the local, the adjacent villages, which is only 5 minutes walk from the quarry. They're really benefiting from this growth of visitors.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Thank you for bringing us such meaningful agency for architecture that we probably don't really think about in this kind of cultural context. But also thank you for coming all the way from Beijing just for this, and she's flying back tonight, like in a few hours. So thank you very much.